Hey guys, it's Master Friday here. It's been a few days since I've made a video, and I'm coming back with a video on why the world isn't ready for Linux gaming yet. Now, that title is a little bit of a clickbait, sure, but I'm referring more on an experience that a very good friend of mine recently had with Linux gaming. As we are all aware, Linux native gaming has come a very long way in the past 10 years. Hell, the past 5 years for gaming when it comes to Linux native is comparable to damn near a decade and a half of progress on Windows. And I'm proud to say that I use a free and open source operating system built by us, the community, that can fulfill the vast majority of people's needs. Linux gaming has come along so far that Gaben, the Linux gaming messiah, along with his private company Valve, is paying over 100+ open source developers to work on the Proton compatibility layer, as well as the Mesa drivers that we all crave. There is even a commercial Linux gaming device by Valve called the Steam Deck, and Gaben himself said as far back as 2013 that Linux is the future of PC gaming. I fully believe that this is true, as Linux is now very capable of playing games thanks to massive improvements in Proton, which has helped further develop Wine, by the way, through commits upstream. And Linux graphics drivers, too, have come a very, very long way. I remember we shit on NVIDIA now, but NVIDIA used to be the only guy that even had a graphics driver for Linux back in the day. Soon the days of having to pass through a dedicated graphics card to play your favorite games in a KVM, that'll be over. And the only games that'll be left unplayable will be games with kernel level anti-cheats, which if you use Linux by choice, probably don't want these games anywhere near your system. However, that's not to say that there are things about Linux that make it less than favorable for the average consumer. The thing about the average consumer is that most of them think they are tech savvy when in reality, the average consumer doesn't know a single damn thing about how a computer works. The inherent problem that we have is that Linux as a Unix like operating system is fundamentally different from Windows. And although it comes on different levels of difficulty based on how well you set up your distro is, even newbie distros are often more involved than baseline Windows, which is by choice of security model. What I'm saying here is that although Linux is rock solid, ease of use does not meet the boomer consumer's standard, which is to be butt fucking easy. Just like how security and usability are often mutually exclusive traits, the less control you have over an operating system often leaves you with less features to tweak, to customize. Think about all the choices we have in Linux in terms of desktop environments. We got KDE Plasma, GNOME, Cinnamon Mate, Budgie, LXDE, LXQT. Fuck. We have madmen using the common desktop environment for God's sake. Don't even get me started on the choices of us that live in tiling window manager land. There are countless window managers out there. Linux window managers are to X11 as obscure black metal bands are to metalheads. There are window managers out there. You can count the tens of people that use it on one hand, maybe even the single amount of people on one hand. Windows doesn't have this, especially now more than ever. And the problem with the ones that Windows does have is that they often don't even mitigate Explorer.exe and are bloated nonsense like Rainmeter. The average consumer doesn't know that any of this crap exists. When a consumer sees a taskbar with an app launcher at the bottom, they think, oh, Windows. And when they see a tiny panel up top with a dock at the bottom, they think, oh, Mac OS. And when they see Linux, they think, oh, HackerMan, which is not too much far from the truth, though more in the original sense than what people think when they think hacker. One of the biggest hurdles that we face as the Linux community is that we do not have a distro that is considered the forefront of Linux. We have distros that unofficially carry this moniker, but it is so subjective that the title is meaningless. We have over 600 distros and three main forks to go down, those being Debian, Ubuntu, and Arch. Fedora, if you want to throw in a fourth, and all of them follow entirely different philosophies on software. SteamOS seeks to solve this problem, but until that comes to be released, we will still have this problem. And even then, the problem may not even go away until they add in things that help with compatibility. Recently, my friend who has a Linux laptop that he loves got an Asus FX504 GM under my recommendation. We got it from a local game store for about 400 bucks. and it was from 2018, so the hardware support would be mature. But being a laptop, especially with NVIDIA graphics, I knew that he'd likely run into issues with a dedicated graphics card if he used Linux on it. But he wasn't really planning on that at first. He'd used Windows on it until he had enough of the software on it that he could not control. One such example being a very old install of McAfee that used an Internet Explorer based uninstaller, which means you cannot uninstall it as it has root privileges that goes above the admin account. He made a choice to wipe Windows off of it and go Linux on it, and I was all for it despite knowing that there would be problems with it. Just some preface before I start this segment. These are not Linux issues. There are problems that we face as Linux users, but it is not our fault that devs poorly support Linux or sometimes not at all. His previous laptop had Endeavour OS with FXCE4 on it, but considering this laptop wasn't really limited, I wanted to give him the premier experience of Linux with KDE Plasma. The first problem we ran into was with the HDMI port. Plugging in the HDMI port while the PC was powered on or changing anything related to the monitor settings would cause the entire PC to freeze. This is a big deal to him because he has a high refresh rate Quad HD monitor that he uses to play on because his internal display is not that great. Plus, it's much bigger. While it was very evident that given enough time, I could resolve the issue and make it fully functional, he was fine with just using the internal display for the moment, as we really wanted to play some Vermintide 2. Problem with that is that Vermintide 2 has problems with easy anti-cheat on Linux, which can be mitigated as the host. The problem? Oh, nothing. Except that out of two of three of us, we are playing on Linux. The game would stutter up and freeze entirely for him, booting him out of the game and just creating more frustration for him. Fat Shark has been working on EAC for Linux for a while, by the way, and EAC actually works perfectly fine in Darktide. I mean, like flawless, which is abysmally ridiculous that it's still not working in Vermintide 2 yet. But eventually he gave up, and all of my hard work into setting this laptop up for him perfectly just went down the shitter. I had to install Windows on his laptop for him again today, which is still better than how his laptop was set up before. Plus, it's 10, so it's a little bit better than Windows 11, but that just sucks. He and I were both excited to get him the Linux gaming experience, and due to those problems, he has decided against using Linux on that device now, and likely has a sour taste in his mouth from the experience, despite having another laptop, with Linux on it. Linux gaming has come a long way. It really is amazing the progress that has been made in the past several years. If you had told me 10 years ago that gaming on Wine or Linux native would be as good or even better than Windows, I'd have laughed in your face and said no. But we are only at that point for those of us who live and breathe Linux. We are not fully prepared to accommodate the average user because to the average user that grew up on Windows, we are like speaking Spanish, learnable only if you're willing to learn. As the Steam Decks sell on more and more, we would get more market share, and when SteamOS releases, I really think a lot more people will be at least willing to try and make the switch. But until then, we will continue to only truly improve for ourselves, not the average consumer.